Good evening and welcome to Writers on Writing. I am your host, Dr. Brenda Greene, and this radio show is paid for by Medgar Evers College. Writers on Writing comes to you each week and gives you, our listening audience, an opportunity to hear writers from the African diaspora talk about their work, their craft, and their lives. And I'm very, very pleased to have with me this evening the author Breena Clarke. Welcome, Breena.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad to be here. It's a pleasure.
I'm glad to have you. Just so you know that I am the founder and executive director of the Center for Black Literature and director of the National Black Writers Conference. And just to share some information about Breena Clarke, Breena Clarke is the author of 4 novels, most recently Alive Nearby, which we'll be talking about. I just found it fascinating. Also, Angels Make Their Hopes Here, her 2014 novel, and she won or was listed under the Oprah Book Club for her 1999 novel River Across My Heart, which was when I was first introduced to you, Greener. And then, of course, her second novel, Stand the Storm, was named 100 Best for 2008 by the Washington Post. She also has written numerous short stories and essays in a number of journals, including the Quality Journal, the Stone Coast Review, Nervous Breakdown. You can go to her website, which she will share with us. Mm-hmm. And she is also the co-founder of the Hobart Festival of Women Writers and the co-editor of Noun, which is an online journal for the Hobart Festival of Women Writers. Mm-hmm. So she is very accomplished writer, has been writing for decades, and I'm saying decades. I can say that because we're close to the same age.
Yeah, you sure can. Mm-hmm.
I can say that. So, I want to start by talking about what happened to me when I started reading Alive Now and Nearby, I should say, Alive Nearby, your most recent book.
Yes, yes.
And it just brought back so many memories. It was just so moving. And when I read it, I said, I have to find out what's the context for this book. Who are the characters? What was the motivation? So guess what I did? I went back and I ordered your other 2 novels, Stand the Storm, mm-hmm. and Angels Make Their Hope Here. And I was just so moved by the stories. Oh. So I'm going to ask you if you can share with our listeners and for our readers kind of what the portrait is around these novels and ending with Alive Nearby. Can you give us that without giving the entire books away?
Yes, I think I can. You mentioned that I had been writing fiction for several decades now, and I will own up to that, of course. And I think that sort of forms the basis for the genesis of Alive Nearby. As you may know, I suffered the loss of my son, my young son. Oh, that was in 1989, so it's been a long time ago.
But still, my condolences. That is something that's always going to be really difficult.
Yes, it is. It is. It certainly was a defining moment in my life. And it was after that period, I had always been writing things, but it was after that period that I really got serious about telling some stories, primarily to help to preserve some of the history of the Black community of Georgetown, the larger Black community of Washington, D.C., and on. And I developed characters. I always would say when people ask me that my late son is in many respects a character in all of these novels. He's sort of like the ghost behind a lot of the characters, and
Mhm.
I'm able to access some of those intense feelings in my fiction by drawing him into it in a way. But it wasn't until I'd gotten really away from um well, I started to work on a series of stories and about more contemporary subjects.
Right.
And I got to the point where I felt I was able to speak more directly about my feelings. Again, I didn't want to write memoir, but
Mhm.
I'll say that Alive Nearby is perhaps as close as I get
Right.
writing a memoir.
Creative nonfiction.
Yes, because it does explore those personal feelings,
Yes,
those
it does.
really intense feelings of mine about that relationship, and also the fact, and I've come to the realization is that I continue to be greatly affected by that child, present or not present. And as I become more mature, of course, and as we get mature, we start, I call it the crone brain, but we start going down this whole pathway. You'll smell something and you'll say, and the next thing you know, you're talking about your mother and how when
Yes.
she used to press your hair and the whole thing and the biscuits and the more mature I become, the more I seem to do that very readily. So I've decided to explore it and to just embrace it. And that's a lot of what happened when I was working on Alive Nearby. A lot of those moments came back to me, and I was able to explore them, I guess, with a little less fear and trepidation that I'd had when I
Right.
was.
So how do those moments show up in the two previous novels? Stand the Storm and particularly Angels Make Their Home Here. Because after reading that, I had to put Alive Nearby down.
Mhm,
I started
mhm,
reading it and I said, no, I need some more information. And so when I went back and read those two novels, I was
mhm,
able to appreciate Alive Nearby on a different level, on a deeper level. And I just saw so many themes you were bringing in, not only grief and loss,
mhm, mhm,
memories, the importance of family, the importance of community, the struggle we go through, the inherent racism we deal with, the whole notion of mixed race communities.
mhm,
And I don't know how many people are aware there were so many,
yeah.
particularly in the North, particularly, people who left the South and migrated to the North. So how did you, so if you can share with our audience, because I think that they would appreciate seeing that trajectory without telling the story, seeing the connection that runs between those books.
Well, I guess one notion that runs in both of those books, and of course, then is reflected in Alive Nearby, is the concept of being suddenly bereft. And I had a friend who, when I published Stan's Storm, she read it, one of my dearest friends, and she said, Breena, why you do that? Why do people have to die like that in every book? Why do people? And all of a sudden, next thing you know, somebody's dead. And I said, it's selfish of me. I realize that, but I want other people to feel that feeling. And it's a pretty universal feeling,
Yes, it is.
even though many of us deny uh, the effects of it. And so that happens in Stand the Storm. angels make their hope here comes closer in my mind to really creating a character who is like my son, or as I imagine he might have been as a mature person. Jan Smoot, who goes, who takes
Yes.
Darcy to New York and then has all the adventure, and then I won't say, but again, a sudden a tragic situation is kind of my strong suit. But so that's some of the genesis of that. I find, I guess I have a little bit more ease in working through historically based fiction,
Yes.
because I have this burning feeling sometime that our lives and accomplishments and history, just the plain facts of our history, is obscured and denigrated and ignored. And heaven help us, what's going on now
Yes.
with all of this retrenchment in terms of teaching our history. I feel very keenly aware of that. And so one of the things that I attempt to do in my work is to present our history, is to try to present us as full human beings.
Right.
And our history as well. I just get worked up when I think about Tulsa, the Tulsa massacre, and things like that. And that even to this day, people know little about it. These
Right.
kind of facts are obscured, and lies and our history. And I really think that fiction offers an opportunity to move the dial a little bit, to correct some things,
Yes.
simply because it creates a world and people can understand and empathize. I think empathy is really
Most
big.
definitely.
Mhm.
One of the things, a panel, one of our roundtable discussions is going to be at our upcoming conference
Mhm.
is called Black Writers' Letters to America.
Mhm.
And of course, I thought about you.
Mhm.
And so, because that's what you're really doing, you're writing a letter to America from the Black perspective.
Yes.
So why did you choose the letter form for Alive Nearby?
Well, that is a good question. And it was one that I asked myself. I wanted to be able to create a direct voice, a person who could speak directly to the other person, um, to express a fuller point of view. Also, I became fascinated with the chronological quality of letters.
Mhm.
In that, even though one of the things I'm sort of trying to do is not be chronological.
No, and you're
In
not,
fact,
because you're going back and forth. Yes.
yes, I've been trying to go back and forth
Mhm.
because I honestly believe that um, that is the best way for us to go forward, is to be moving ourselves back and forth and to not get stuck either in the past or solely focused on the
Right.
future, but by bringing them together and not being, too definite, too rigid. I
And that's
suppose.
how the mind works, isn't it? The mind
Yes,
works. I mean, we're going back and forth. And so when you're writing these letters, you're writing, of course, to M.
yes.
M is a metaphor, I guess, for your son, but also for Martin and Malcolm.
Mhm.
You have these reference points. So the way you're using the metaphor of the M and then Alive Nearby
Mhm.
how, the importance of speaking the names so that we remember. Memory is very, very important.
And
Uh,
it's funny you should say that, because that's one of the things that shortly after my son died, um, I started writing because I was afraid that I would forget something.
mhm,
That with him gone, I'd forget about some of those days, and so did start writing things down in some very small booklets. And I've actually never used any of those booklets as the source of anything
mhm.
creative, but they gave me a way to get myself geared up, to get myself in a process. And so I feel very strongly about creating that an infrastructure for remembering. But I found as I've gotten older, I haven't forgotten anything. I haven't forgotten.
No, it's
It's
particularly
as if
things in the
they're,
way in the deep past, right?
they're all in little teeny corners in your brain. And
Yes.
the idea that your brain is finite is just ridiculous. I mean, the brain is absolutely infinite. And so there seems to be all kinds of little pockets. And these memories come back. I remember days, incidents and all of these things. So um, I feel there's a play between what we're afraid we'll forget
Mhm.
and a sort of race to try and record these things,
Right.
to set them down, to archive them.
Well, that's
Uh,
the beautiful thing about being a writer, is that you get into the habit of
yes,
doing that. You get into the habit of recording what is going on in your life and using writing as a way to think and to remember. And I
yes,
think, if we can if more people would do that, I think it would, sometimes it's a way of healing. It's a
yes,
way of working things out. Writing is very, very natural. And think about when we didn't have, those people, when we didn't have an environment that was so full of media and outside
mm,
forces, many
yes,
more people were writing. So
right.
as you think about Alive Now and why you wanted to tell that, who is your audience? Who do you think who's the audience for this? And yeah, I think about that, particularly as you reference what we're going through now. Is it the people who are currently in our society who don't understand the depth of the Black experience? Is it primarily targeted toward Black people to enrich? Is it me? It could be a number of things, but from your perspective, who is your audience?
Boy, that's a hard question. And and lately I've been asking myself that question more and more. I think it is, I've always tried to say that the audience for my writing is anyone who wants to come in and be a part. I feel like come on in, you can be a part of it. I don't want people to feel excluded in my fiction. That being said, it has a certain specificity. I'm not, I am unapologetically writing about the African American experience.
Mhm.
Now, that experience, in my view, is a very wide, and it encompasses a whole lot. It encompasses a lot of white people. It encompasses many Native people. It encompasses everyone in every corner of this country and this continent, in my view. But I am writing with a certain specificity. So that's the kind of thing I'm juxtaposing. The specific African American, but also within the context of the whole of American history,
Right.
because
American history and American literature. And I always think about the whole concept of inviting. And so
Mhm,
as a writer, you're inviting people to participate in a conversation, and you are thinking about there are other writers who you are reading or have read.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so I think that writers really end up going into conversations with other writers it's, it's based on what you've read. If anyone tells you how do you become a good writer, it's that you're reading. So when you think about
Absolutely.
people who you may be in conversation with as a writer, who are the people who are part of that world, who you're in conversation with? Are people, writers who've influenced you? What does that conversation look like?
Well, I would say number one, the beloved sister you have behind you on the shelf. I also have her
Yes,
back here
I
too.
really love it.
Toni
Yes.
Morrison. I say that from several perspectives. Sometimes I feel like a little fangirl because I remember when I was quite young and encountering Morrison's work for the first time. I came up as an avid reader. I was one who read a lot. And then when I get up to when I became aware of Morrison and Baldwin, well, it's almost as if the top of my head came off. These people were creating a huge world of delight for me. Uh,
Right.
Not easy, but complex. I remember being greatly influenced by the work of John Edgar Wideman, his
Really? Okay.
early work. Believe yes, I don't hear his name mentioned so much anymore. But his early short stories were just fabulous, and
Yeah.
they excited me so. Um, Ernest J. Gaines was also one of my great influences. I was lucky enough to be able to work with him a couple of times at Sewanee Writers Conference.
Okay.
So, and those high points in my development. Um, there's certainly contemporary writers. I'm struggling to think of. Certainly, I tell you, my girl Mecca Jamila Sullivan. All right, a contemporary writer who's really smoking hot. Of course, the great Alexis DeVoe has also been an influence on my life and in my writing. And I'll tell you, I suppose the writer who has been most influential just before Morrison would have to be my sister, Cheryl Clarke. She's a
Yes.
poet and she's published a number of collections. She, I work with her on the Hobart Festival of Women Writers. As I say, she's a poet, feminist poet, lesbian feminist poet. She is a unique influence on me because I was recalling the other day, she was the first person who recited the words to Ode to a Grecian Urn to me. She said it, the last line. And I'll never forget it. I was really kind of young and she was young too. She's a couple of years older than I am, but she shared that with me. And I'll never forget it. There's so many times when she brought something beautiful or meaningful to my attention.
Right.
And so that's why I say, oh, yeah, she's
Yes,
the,
you can. Yes.
oh, yeah.
Early first influence. So
Mm-hmm.
just in doing this work, as I mentioned before about the whole notion, the mixed race communities, and just documenting that story. What was your research process like for your books in general? And as you came to this, because you also talk about the floods in Alive nearby and
Right.
how
Yeah.
that has affected our community. So what is your research process been as an historical novelist or
Yeah.
fiction writer?
Well, I have gone through periods of being very nervous about that process, thinking, wow, am I doing the depth of research that is necessary? So I suppose I did a whole lot more research when I was working on Stand the Storm, set in the Civil War era in Washington.
Right.
Turns out there are a lot of books written about the Civil War. It's a big topic. I read a lot of work. I usually say that I depend on the spade work of others. I will admit that freely. I have done some of my own research, looking through documents and looking through things, but by and large, I do depend on the spade work of others, reading other texts to piece together histories. In working on Angels Make Their Hope Here, I was sort of branching out of Washington, the Washington, D.C. area, and up in the highlands of New Jersey. I was intrigued by some research I did on the Ramapo Mountain people, the so-called Ramapo Mountain people. And I went to a couple of conferences. I've gone to the Underground Railroad conference that takes place, and to speak to people who have done a lot of research. I got intrigued by the Ramapo Mountain people, and that got me interested in kind of the history of New Jersey, which is actually kind of fascinating. Most people think New Jersey is it's fairly
I thought
boring.
when I read it, I thought that maybe that you were from that area. You had lived in that area.
Actually, no, but I'm living in Jersey City now, so
very different.
that area, yeah, very different. But New Jersey has a lot of Underground Railroad sort of history.
Okay.
People came up through the state. As you know, William Still operated out of Camden, New Jersey, Cape May, New Jersey. I was just down in Cape May at the Harriet Tubman Museum down there. Came back, and people were surprised. Well, what does Harriet Tubman got to do with Cape May? Well, she worked there as a seasonal worker, but also she connected with other Underground Railroad figures in that area. And when you look at the map of New Jersey, you can see why Cape May is a spot for that. I found out that Perth Amboy, New Jersey, it's a port, of course, and it was a center for slave trading and a lot of slave commerce, because New Jersey did not have a duty on importing slaves. New York and Pennsylvania did. So somebody trying to save a little money would come into Perth Amboy and offload their slaves, not pay a duty, and then walk those slaves from Perth Amboy to Long Island and other places. And you can look at a map and see what a long distance that is. I can get off on a tangent, and the next thing you know, I'm giving the whole history of New Jersey. But that's kind of how I approach it. I go around and see a lot of these places and look at them, because the topography oftentimes will give you ideas for the story. In Angels, it was those falls, the great falls of the Passaic up there. They're really quite grand, and they've been like that for centuries. And people have settled in these places. And a lot of it is you can hide. And
right. So those metaphors, your titles of the book, end up being metaphors for part of the research that you do. So what was it like writing, going back to Alive Nearby?
yes.
What was that process like to write that? Because it's just filled with so much, like I said, it's going back and forth and a lot of metaphors, and it just, it's the type of book, after I read one of the letters, I'd have to stop and think, reflect.
Well, it really warms my heart to hear you say these very praiseworthy things. It was, for me, somewhat cathartic to work through some of the grief. And also, I guess I've come to a period in my life similar to some of the ruminations of my character Amaranta Douglas, where you're summing up, you're looking back on the things that you have done, what you have and haven't accomplished, and what may be your responsibility. Like me, she has to figure out a reason to keep going, a reason to, in a sense, not let her ancestors down.
To sustain the legacy.
Yes, exactly, to sustain the legacy. And, often we get in the middle of it and we question whether we're not just wasting our time or what is the purpose of this. But I do believe in that importance. And I do believe that it's important to express these ideas and these feelings, even if you feel as though there isn't an audience for it, that there are not people who are receptive and who will empathize with your character, because that's one of the values of literature, is that it can in fact outlive the author.
You never know whose heart it's going to touch.
You never know. No. You never know. And a person will come up to you and tell you how deeply touched they were by something in your book and all, and that means the world. Right. It means the world when someone says that to you.
So tell us about your work with the Hobart Festival of Women Writers.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very rewarding. It's been very rewarding. We have actually, we started in 2013. My sister and I and several writers whom we knew, we said, well, because my sister and her spouse operate a bookstore in a small upstate village called Hobart. It's in the western Catskills. And it's a unique town. It has, at this point, I think 7 independent bookstores. And they sell all kinds of different stuff, but they work together to bring people to the town. And we got the idea that we ought to bring some women writers to the town. And we were feeling that women authors didn't get as much attention, certainly. And that we could just have a festival, a weekend festival, in which we invited writers. We can introduce them to a slightly larger audience and sell their books and have workshops and panel discussions. Okay. And so we've been doing that. And we're going into our 11th year.
Congratulations on that. Yeah.
Thank you. It's really been rewarding. It's really been rewarding. We've had so many writers. Cheryl Boyce Taylor, I'm sure you know the poet.
Yes.
J.P. Howard. There are going to be so many women whose names I'm not going to be able to remember who have come. Mecca Sullivan, as I said, the author of Big Girl. Oh boy, we've had all kinds of. Esther Cohen, who writes daily poems, and she's a novelist, has written many novels. And Nana Ekwa Bruhammond has come. Oh, it has been over the years that we have been doing this. I guess we've had 60 to 65.
That's wonderful. Well, we're really, really pleased that you're going to be joining us for the Wild Seeds Writers Conference, not Writers Conference, Writers Workshop, which will be held online. So I encourage our listening audience, you can register for that. Breena is leading the fiction workshop. Yay. And Bridget Davis is leading the memoir workshop. But it'll be online. You can go to the website at the centerforblackLiterature.org, www.centerforblackLiterature.org. It's from February the 22nd through the 25th. So you have an opportunity to work with Breena Clarke. And
Yeah.
Breena, I don't know if you know, at our National Black Writers Conference, we started this last year. We have a brunch reunion where we bring in all of the people who participated in workshops and the workshop leaders. We get together and have a brunch at the conference to participate in the conference and just to get together and to share and read. So we hope that you will come to that part of our conference.
All right. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
which
coming.
will be. So as we come to a close, what message do you have for writers, for people who are just beginning to write, and what can we leave them with?
You know, Nike stole it. Just do it is really, that's the simple thing. I guess, and people say, well, put yourself in the chair and do it. But if you want to do it, then begin. Sometimes it's difficult to begin. So I say, just start. A lot of times I make a plan. I'm very specific about it. I'll say Monday, I'm starting this. Monday at 10 a.m., this is when I start. And that's what I say to people. Give yourself a time and a place. Don't think about it until then. Be sure you are ready and then go from there. I think we have to, I would say to a writer, it's important to make writing a part of your day.
Yes.
A regular part of your day. And then also, a lot of times people who work say, I don't have time to write. I really don't have time to write. You don't have to do it, spend 3 hours every day. You could spend 10 minutes. That's one thing. And also, much of the time that I spend writing is time I spend thinking, not just the time putting the words down.
Right.
So in the shower and in the car, I include that as writing time as well.
Right.
If I'm
that's a good point. That's a good point. Because writing is thinking. Writing is thinking. Yes.
Yes. And sometimes we don't give ourselves as much credit.
Yes.
For the time we spend working out the details.
Right. That's right. So thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure speaking with you. I want to encourage our readers to purchase Alive Nearby.
Oh, yes, please.
It's a wonderful collection of letters that will bring back, focus on the importance of memory and remembering and our stories. And it's beautifully written. It's like reading poetry.
Oh, thank you so much for all the wonderful things you said.
And remember, the writer is always reading. The reader is always writing. Keep reading and writing. Empower yourselves as readers and writers. And this has been Dr. Brenda Greene. This radio show is paid for by Medgar Evers College. You can also visit our YouTube page at www.centerforblackLiterature.org. And remember, we also have coming up the National Black Writers Conference, March 20th through the 23rd. And you can work with Breena Clarke at the Wild Seeds Writers Retreat at Medgar Evers College, February the 22nd through the 25th. Sign up and be inspired and get that work done. Just do it.
That's right.
Okay. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.